I imagine that the celebration continued into the night and into the morning. But, you know, after that judgment, there's a lot of work to be done. But let's take a look at the issues at stake. Yes, you have seen her in that opening slide. And in fact, in the report, we're joined this morning by Ms. Mufuliat Fijabi, who's the CEO of Nigerian Women's Trust Fund. She's a gender and development practitioner. And right next to her is Madam Obi, who is a convener, Nigeria Civil Situation Room and Country Director, Action Aid Nigeria. It's good to have you on the program this morning. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to begin with Madam Fijabi. For a lot of people, they didn't even know that maybe this matter was in court until they heard about the judgment yesterday. And apparently this has been in court since 2020. I know it's a landmark judgment. I know you tried to express your joy earlier on, but can you walk us through the journey up to this point?
Okay, thank you very much for having me, and congratulations to all Nigerian women and men alike who have been very supportive. The journey started after the 2019 general elections, whereby we had a very drastic drop in the number of women who emerged as elected representatives. So as an organization, the Nigerian Women Trust Fund was set up to cover the gaps in terms of gender in governance. So at a meeting of one of its board of directors, mentioned that there is need to do something more important and different from the usuals. And one of the suggestions by the directors was that the Nigerian Women Trust Fund should work with other like-minded organizations to lead the process of having the court of law interpret what non-discrimination means and what the affirmative action interpretation is based on the Nigerian government's 2006 gender policy. So then we started some meetings, some planning. A lot of civil society organizations were part of these meetings, this process. And at some point, we also met with the Falana and Falana's chambers for their support. And Mr. Femi Falana honorably accepted, to support the women pro bono, in getting to where we need to get to. So the litigation proper started in August of 2020. And that's when, with the heavy support from Women Radio 91.7 FM, we had a lot of media visibility. If you actually check online, you will see that there has been a lot of report about the court case. It's just that because the judiciary is not what you go in the morning and come back in the evening, a lot of people felt that it's going to even take longer than we had it down. So we went to court a number of times. Mrs. Fumi Falana was in the court to argue the case. And then we got the judgment date, even though it was rescheduled for a number of times, but it eventually came yesterday. And the plaintiff organizations were also in the court, to listen to this judgment. So, and to say the least, the victory is a remarkable one, because then it means that the government is being strongly reminded of its action in terms of ensuring that there is proper recognition of the role of women based on the gender policy that it has in place, which has been put together because of its commitment to international and regional instruments, speaking to the need to encourage and acknowledge the need for the inclusion of women in order to achieve even development in the country, and in order to be attuned with what is happening globally, because it's obvious that the world made up of men and women require the expertise of both men and women, to achieve an even development. So some of the expectations that we have in this regard is that the government would henceforth obey this injunction and ensure that in the appointments in all its institutions and establishments, the injunction is respected. And I'm very optimistic that it's going to impact positively, in how our governance process grows and in how we deepen our democracy. Yes, okay. 2023 general election is here. This is
right. We'll get to that.
To mention that the judgment did not only just recognize the need to adopt and utilize the 35% affirmative action. It also recognized the equality of the sexes in terms of the governance process of Nigeria.
Okay, so let's break this down even further. I'll come to Madam Obi in a moment. But in terms of this judgment, because it's easy to hear, oh, victory for women, but to understand, I mean, the reliefs sought, because, I mean, I heard the lawyer saying, oh, you know, all the reliefs sought were granted, as it were. So if we could just take a look at those reliefs and, you know, get a proper explanation of the import of this. So part of the relief sought is a declaration that the failure of the first defendant, I imagine the government, President Buhari and Attorney General, to implement the 35% affirmative action policy of the FG is illegal, unlawful, null, and an arbitrary violation of the National Gender Policy 2006. Also talks about the failure of first defendant to implement 35% affirmative action as unlawful, illegal, and a violation of the Constitution itself. A declaration that the overwhelmingly predominant appointment of the male gender into decision-making positions of the Federation is wrong, unlawful, unconstitutional, null, and void. And a few other reliefs sought, I think 3 other reliefs sought by you and the other organizations involved in this. So in terms of this judgment, what does this mean in reality for government? I mean, this current government has made its appointments in terms of ministers and all of that. But with this judgment, how does it change the optics?
Okay, what it means is that with this judgment now, henceforth, the government is under obligation, you know, to take into recognition the need to bring a minimum of 35 representation of women in any of its appointments. You know, this means that in boards, parastatals, ministerial positions, henceforth, if you have 10 men, about 3, 4 of them must be women in any appointment process. Unlike before, where you even have all boards made up of men, or like before, where you even have some commissions without female representation. So what it means is that at all levels, you know, based on the provisions of this national gender policy, there'll be deliberate effort based on this court injunction to ensure that both sexes are included, and the minimum that can happen is 35% for women. You know, so it means that there'll be a fast development in terms of how Nigeria is viewed globally, you know, because then there will be more women, you know, taking active roles in how the governance process of Nigeria is run. Of course, the government is the leading body when it comes to how governance runs. So it means that women will be considered, you know, it's no longer what you can negotiate or you can start lobbying for. It's a court injunction that is saying that this must be respected and this must be obeyed.
Well, let me ask Madam Obi, are you optimistic that this court order or this judgment will be complied with by government?
First, I want to say a big thank you, and I want to say congratulations. And I say a big thank you to channels, and thank you to the media for walking us through, for following up with us, for being in the battlefront, I will say, for following us through even the struggle through the National Assembly. And all of this, you know, I say congratulations and say big well done to the media. And say big congratulations to my sister here, Fijabi, for her tireless effort, and all the sisters and the brothers who worked on this. It is my conviction that the judgment will make a big difference. It's a boost and it's an inspiration to all the young aspirants, to all the women aspirants across the country, and to womanhood, that we need to stand up for our rights. And I remember when Fijabi called the first meeting of the CSOs, we sat together. It's like we're looking at, we said, we even have retired judges, a lot of women who are retired judges already. So it's not that they are not finding qualified women to appoint.
Well, madam,
and we took a decision to
not
bring
exactly the question that I'm asking.
Experienced people to come together and break it down.
Well, just 1 second. You know, the question that I'm asking you, I'm sorry, the question I'm asking is, are you optimistic that this judgment will be complied with by government?
I am not government, so I cannot answer for government, but I can say that we will work for the implementation. And so if they don't comply with it, it means they think they are above the law, and we continue to go to court.
Okay.
We'll continue to engage them on several fronts for them, because it's like, you know, you are working on one leg.
Well, a follow-up to that, madam.
50% of your population.
Just 1 second.
And
A follow-up to that.
Inclusion. You are not doing them a favor.
Yeah. A follow-up to that question, madam, is that this judgment, this national gender policy, the basis of the judgment that we're celebrating now is the national gender policy of 2006. Now, it's not a policy that was restricted to just the federal government. It was supposed to also be cascaded to the state governments as well. In your opinion, or from what you know or may have read over time, what are the things that could have impeded the implementation of that policy to the book or by the book?
I think we need to understand that the Nigerian government is signatory to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. The 1999 Constitution, one of the things that was in defense for National Assembly, one of the arguments was that, you know, the Constitution of Nigeria is non-discriminatory. And so we were already protected. But in 1995, the Nigerian government was also signatory to the Declaration of Affirmative Action, the Beijing Platform, you know, of action, which was 30%. The Nigerian government came back and they started working, you know, with the newly created Ministry of Women Affairs at that time. And then they came up with the 2006, you know, a national gender policy to be able to give life, you know, is a guideline to the implementation of the Constitution itself. And so when it came on board, they then decided that it was 30% was too low. And so they said 35%. And that's what gave birth to the national gender policy. And then the implementation, we are not finding it. You can't even, it's the will, the political will for the government. What the judgment is doing is compelling them to do what they ought to have done. And
what may interest you?
So you can't say you want to create a board. We don't need a board that will have 100% men or 100% women. Put the two together in a boardroom. The quality of any decision depends on who is in the boardroom. You can't represent women for women.
All right, madam. What may interest you is that the follow-up to that national gender policy of 2006 was that there was an implementation plan drawn up in 2008. And it is supposed to be multi-sectoral and across all levels of government, executive, legislature, judiciary. In fact, part of the recommendation was that there's supposed to be training for the judges in the judiciary concerning what that means. And it was even spread to the entertainment industry to review the laws or the policies that guide movie making and all of that. So I'm wondering if it is not just the federal government that has a responsibility here. The private sector have their roles to play. Government doesn't have a movie making house. It's just government guiding and providing the enabling environment. So in terms of acceptance by the society, by the various communities, what is missing?
I think a lot of sensitization needs to happen. For us who are going back to the drawing board, we have to go back to the drawing board. And I must commend, the senior advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana, for standing upright, for standing up, for social justice, which has been what he has lived his life, and his wife, Fumi. For the wife, we were in Women in Nigeria together. So this is very, very remarkable. I want to commend her. For everybody is involved. What this is saying is that every strata of where we find ourselves, so where you make appointments that is non-representative, we have to stand by the Constitution of Nigeria. And the 1999 Constitution specifies the non-discrimination on the basis of sex. And so these issues are issues that we have to engage in. We have to go on sensitization. We will circulate the judgment, and we will come down with also other implementation strategies from the non-governmental, environment, from the civil society environment. We're going to continue to pull out, some of the issues of the judgment. But this is what we have been working for. We work on social justice based on the equality of the human person. We work on human rights as an approach to development. And this will lead, like my sister pointed out, this will lead to a lot of development. And there is no development without women.
Absolutely.
It's very important to focus on your population, both young and old. Inclusion of the young people, whether male or female, that we need to work together for the development of this country.
And I think that's a very important point.
Reclaiming Nigeria. Because when you put many minds, there's a lot of selfishness. Why don't you want to bring more women on board? We want our children. So I think this is a good reward in terms of the days we spent in the sun. My sister, was there.
Right.
A lot of times, and they were going back and forth from the court. While we were at the National Assembly, the court case was going on.
So I'd like to take you up on...
I really want to commend everyone.
Okay, so let me follow up on that. And this is for Madam Fijabi, because, there's this saying that there are different routes to the market, right? So we have what has been termed the 5 gender bills, 5 women bills in the National Assembly. And one of them speaks on 35% affirmative action. It will seem that you have achieved that now via the courts, but there are still other issues, other bills, as it were. So how does this affect those gender bills, and what is the plan?
Okay, well, yes, it's true that it has addressed a little bit of it, and this is just the beginning. All the other bills should still be pushed, because those ones are talking about indigenship, talking about citizenship. All of these are still very critical to the role that women play in the democratic governance of Nigeria. And just to add to your question earlier on how other sectors would respond to this victory at the court, the National Gender Policy 2006 that the Ministry of Women Affairs has the responsibility to help implement, actually has a call to all sectors to respond to the dictates inside that national gender policy, and which means that different sectors, wherever they are in Nigeria, have an obligation, to implement the call by this national gender policy. And we have already seen that some institutions actually have started responding as a sector. I'm aware that the Independent National Electoral Commission, for example, has a gender policy in place, NAPTIP has in place, the police has in place, and some of them have implementation framework, that they are using to implement already. So it means that with this injunction, those that have already started responding have an edge. They are going to move faster. Those that are yet to respond, would now have to run to catch up with it. It's an injunction, and we know that as law-abiding citizens, as law-abiding government, this will be obeyed. On our part, as civil society organizations, as critical stakeholders, we'll continue with the advocacy, we'll continue with the necessary social justice process, to ensure that the information gets to all the sectors, and that implementation, is assured. And to also urge the National Assembly in terms of the bills before them, that has made women in Nigeria to be at the gate of the National Assembly for weeks, that this judgment is a reminder that truly there is discrimination, and if you look at the judgment, which hopefully will be made public for everyone to read, you will find that there are evidence, establishing all of this. And as a country, we cannot afford to be behind in terms of how we recognize the expertise of both male and female in any process. We have to be up to task in how we channel our process of development. And I would also like to emphasize the fact that the government need not see it as a defeat. They should see it as a strong reminder, to them in terms of all those international and regional instruments that they have signed on to at different times, you know, talking about the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, talking about the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, talking about the Beijing Platform for Action. You know, all of these are critical documents. You also have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, you know, so all of this, you have the Solemn Declaration at the level of the African region. The government signed all of these instruments without reservation.
Clearly, we have plethora of these instruments.
Long time, you know,
it's mind-boggling.
Without reservation.
Right. We have a 2006 gender policy. I hear that it's also been reviewed. I recall the minister, I think in March, talking about a review of the gender policy. I think, what is it, 2016 to 20... I'm not sure, but it has a period of years attached to it, to 2026. But also there, she spoke about this government's performance when it comes to inclusion. And in her words, the Minister for Women Affairs, she said, "I want to put on record that Mr. President has done so much to support women through numerous pro-women projects." And she talked about that revision of the gender policy, that it has been approved by the council, has gone through to clearly show that Mr. President is committed to making a difference as far as women issues are concerned. I mean, we've had women and men alike have had close to 7 years to have a feel of that. Would you say you agree with her on that one?
To a very great extent, I would say all governments have programs, have activities that they are implementing, you know, to support women, you know, but I am of the opinion that it's not enough. If we still have positions, have sectors that are not responsive to the obligations that the government took upon itself by signing all of those regional and international instruments, and we're not up to date. You know, if you look at the number of women in appointive positions is below standard in terms of international comparison. If you look at the number of women in elective positions, it's also very low. So regardless of whatever efforts that the government, the president might have put in place, as the Honorable Minister for Women Affairs has said, yes, it's good, it's okay, but it's not enough. You know, I expected that the government shouldn't have to wait for a court, you know, to give it an injunction to implement a national gender policy that it has put in place. You know, so yes, the policy is being reviewed. Until we see it adopted, then we still continue to make reference to the 2006 version of it. So when it comes out, we can say, yes, the 2022 gender policy. But the reality is that if we're not in tune with what is happening at the international level, no matter how much the government does, the president does, it's still not enough. There are benchmarks, you know. The CEDAW Convention and the Beijing Platform for Action stipulated a minimum of 30% representation of women at all levels. The Nigerian government accepted. It's not just about this current government, it's also about previous government. The government, as at that 2006, undertook to have 35% instead of the 30% that it signed on to. You know, so that means that it has become an obligation. And this court victory, you know, the government should not see it as a defeat. Rather, we should see it as a call to a very strong and deliberate action to put things in the normal places where they should be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Obi, you're also boots on ground, and you're hard to miss, really, with that iconic hairstyle. So you've had to engage on the streets, as it were, in, you know, the boardrooms and all of that. There's still a lot of work to be done. The indigenship question in political parties, and this very contentious one, special seats in the National Assembly. In your interactions, in the meetings you've had, where are you getting most of the pushback from?
First, I just want to respond to the issue of even whether the government has done well. I think I need to come to that, because we look at the promises that is made by the government. You know, and the government of Muhammadu Buhari himself, during his campaign in August 2018, he made a promise that if he is voted for second term, he was not only going to give the 35%, he was going to give 40%. In terms of affirmative action, action speaks louder than voice. Have they performed? So we cannot be messing with words to say, did they perform, did they not perform, did they do well, they haven't done well. And so let their words speak for them, let their actions speak for them. You can't appoint, you have so many agencies. How many agencies are headed by women? Don't we have qualified women? And then even in the body of the committees of agencies, how many women are there? So it's not going to be business as usual. But in terms of the extra seats, we have seen that some of the constitutional amendments have been transmitted to the states. We have had promises, the 7-day legislative days that they said they were going to give, that we should give them to the House of Representatives. That ended yesterday. So today, we should be going back to the drawing board. So there can't be a better time. It's an intervention by the Almighty God to even bring us the judgment, to let people know that we are not insane when we are talking about it. Do you need a court judgment for policies that your government has created to bring you to books? And so it's a challenge. There's a lot of leadership challenges, leadership commitment, pronouncements that you cannot. What is going on, really? Because
very, very quick one, madam, before we call it before we close this conversation. Just 1 second, madam. Just 1 second before we're closing now, but just a quick one. You talked about the fact that there is a need for a lot of sensitization so that people can get on board. Mm-hmm. Where does that start? Definitely not just with government, because at the end of the day, governments are made of people from Nigeria. So where and when does this sensitization start? And if you can proffer, who should lead?
The government, again, has a lot of arms in terms of community sensitization, and also the sensitization of the Federal Executive Council, in terms of the state parliament as well. It's going to be all-inclusive. It should be all-inclusive. Nobody is doing any woman a favor when you bring her into decision-making. You are correcting the imbalance and the quality of your decision-making for progress in your development, for development of your society. And we say, put more voices of women in leadership so that your population can be represented. And so this tells us about the affirmative action, about the Federal Character Commission. It's a character commission, a character imbalance that we're talking about there. It's a male parliament that we have had, and we say correct that by people putting a human parliament. And so the struggle continues for us, but this is victory for Nigeria. I commend the media again not to leave us behind, to continue the great work that you are doing, and we hope that at the end of the day, we leave a better stage than we met it. If not, we become a failure of you're a failure of a generation, if your generation is not better than what you met.
Well,
so
Madam
I want
Obi,
to say a big thank you to all of you, and thank you to my sisters.
Well, because of that commendation, I'm squeezing 1 more minute out for this conversation to wind out. And I'll take this to Madam Fijabi. It would seem that this government has sort of escaped that judgment, because I'm not sure how much appointments they have. But is there a way that this government can take this on board today?
I don't think they have escaped completely, because there will definitely be more board vacancies, more commission vacancies. They should take this into consideration. And it's not just about the government at the national level, at the state level, at the local government level. It needs to run through all the system, to create and widen the space for the inclusion of women. And I must say that having this injunction implemented, it's not like you're favoring women. It's like you're doing the right thing, that you have signed on to, that you have even put up a policy to support and guide in the implementation. So generally for Nigerians, history has already been made. We should celebrate it, and we should all work hard to ensure that the proper socialization process is in place, to really derive the benefit from this kind of judgment. And I must say thank you to the media, as my sister has mentioned earlier on. You have been a bedrock in this struggle. Indeed. In terms of the visibility that you have given. And to all of us, the journey has just begun, and thank you for having us.
Well, sadly, I don't have 1 more minute to give. I mean, I'm not that magnanimous this morning, but we'll have to thank you so much, Madam Mufuliat Fijabi, who is the CEO, Nigerian Women's Trust Fund, a gender and development practitioner, as well as Madam NLB, convener, Nigeria Civil Situation Room, country director Action Aid Nigeria. It's been great having you on the program.
Thank you.